Welcome to the Room of Lives. I'm your host Neil. We're talking to my friend Behnam, who is a classical violinist and music producer. In this episode, Behnam recounts how he became trapped in shame and despair in the world of highly competitive classical music, which has little room for creativity and failure. He then discovered the ideas of Brené Brown, researcher on shame and vulnerability, on moving gracefully into uncertainty, and in the end, he left his classical music career. We then discuss spontaneous creativity, flow states, and the sense of self and ego, and how I made some uninhibited art when I took LSD for the first time. Yeah, you wanted to talk about craft versus creativity?
Yeah.
I guess we have touched upon it a little bit already.
Yeah, no, and that's and so yeah, that's a great that takes us back to sort of when I started auditing that music theory course.
Yeah.
And then I felt like I had a technique that wasn't necessarily my own. I hadn't discovered it. And that to me was kind of like the sad part, because that to me is what's fun, is coming up with stuff, and kind of creating rules of logic that hold and that can like help you make something. So I was like, this music theory stuff works. It's good enough. And so
can I have some of your honey almond butter?
Yes.
By the way,
yeah,
you've got me addicted, man. Anyway. The first time I ate this, I was like, what is this? And it's just first world, just kind of coming up with variations on, well, can I have a little bit more? Anyway, sorry, you were talking about, when you were taking this, auditing this course.
Yeah. So I did feel like it provided me with a technique, with tools, a bit of craftsmanship to be able to hone in on the sounds that I was looking for and bridge together the sounds that I already had in a way that would conventionally sound normal. Right? And so it kind of it was almost like I gave up on reinventing the wheel, and I was like, I want to get from A to B sooner rather than later. I think maybe the bigger thing about craft versus creativity.
This reminds me of, this is the second time that I'm going to be mentioning Richard Feynman, not on the podcast, but this evening.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about education earlier. And so earlier you were talking about how you would, suppose you had to teach violin to a room full of people. You would tell them, just forget everything. We're going to be talking about this thing in terms of what we do with our hands for the next 3 hours.
And any time that we refer to this later, just think of this first-person experience that you had. And I told you how Feynman had a teaching style similar to that he would start from first principles and then always refer back to that. So this is, you were talking about, sort of struggling with notation and deciding at some point you're just going to get with the program. Feynman invented some of his own notation for like he used to just work out physics and math.
He did the
Feynman, that was much later. The Feynman diagram was notation for stuff for which notation did not exist. But when he was in high school or something like that, he used to borrow these really hard like books on calculus and stuff from the library. And he used to tell them that it's for his dad. And then I guess he worked on proofs and stuff. A lot of these things that he thought he was deriving for the first time turned out that other people had already done it, but he invented his own notation. And sometimes later on when he would show other people math, he would mistakenly write his own notation, and people were like, what is that? Like, oh, that's just dx dt, except dx dt is kind of a bad notation because you feel like you can cross out the d's, and so this is what so that's there's a certain, I guess the unifying thread that I can sense here is just this creativity. It's just this, I'm just gonna fucking create this shit.
Well, this is okay. So this is something that I've been thinking about recently. Is I'm like, you just read all these articles about people like, how do I be more creative in this and more creative in that? And I'm like, and this summer has been like a real sort of like back to basics for me, because I decided I want to try and like develop my skills writing like modern music, pop music. And I was like, I don't know where to start. It doesn't matter. You just start doing it. That's like being creative means creating. That's all that means. So I was like, every day I'm just gonna write a new song. It's gonna be garbage, and the next day it's gonna be better. Like, and that was like I was. It's really easy for me, and I think for most people, to get caught up on like, how am I going to do this right the first time? I mean, failure is just generally like an unpleasant thing and not really like lauded. But when you put it in the context of being a like what it was with Legos for me, this never ending cycle, this process, there was no failure. It was just
you must be really good at picking up girls.
Why?
This whole, like, if you think back on all this, like, it's just this new thing and I don't know, but just like lunge into it. There is no such thing as failure. Like, it just sounds like you would be good at like jumping into things where the waters are unknown and just like learning to swim. But would you consider yourself as being gifted at picking?
I don't think I've ever picked up a girl in my life.
Okay, but like at least breaking the ice, like talking to.
I mean,
this is a serious question. I'm actually trying to understand if this is something about just general creativity or just about music.
So, wow, this is. I'm accessing a totally different part of my brain right now. I don't stress out about talking to girls. I don't like
if it was a stranger and you met at a party, you didn't even meet, like you just want to go and talk to them because you like them, you just like looking at them from, you don't know anything about them. Do you find yourself relatively comfortable doing that?
I find myself comfortable doing that. So here's where I think
and I've actually witnessed it to some extent. So
you can either corroborate or deny. I don't mind talking to them because to me frame the context of like, I just want to go talk to this person. Zero. I mean, like, what are they? Like, that's I don't know.
I'm not talking about the situation when all you want to do is talk to them.
Okay, no. So this is actually the only way I know how to do it. I just always tell myself that's the situation, and if something else happens, great. If not, great.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, because to me, it's like I'm probably actually going to miss something interesting if all I want is like to get in their pants. Like, I mean, and that's maybe actually honestly something I'd like to get better about, is like at least being forthcoming about that if that's true. Like, like I don't want to like walk and be like, oh, and never gonna tell you, but I'd love to like go on a date. But that's not really something I'm looking for that often, so much as like, first I want to know, like, do I like talking to this person? Because chances are
and you don't feel like too nervous getting into that situation most times, you would say. Okay, cool. Well, maybe there's There's some central. I mean, we'll come to this
Connective
later,
tissue.
but you sent me this TED Talk video about creativity, vulnerability, and so on, and it may apply, I guess, widely across music as well as social skills and whatnot. Anything that needs creativity and needs you to feel necessitates vulnerability.
Well, okay, can we drop right into that now?
I guess we can. I just want to make sure that we are not finishing.
Okay.
So what we were talking about earlier was craft versus creativity in the context of auditing this class, and I just want to make sure that we didn't leave anything out. That the end of my Facebook time. Okay. Didn't leave anything out as far as that.
Not that much. I think craft versus creativity, I think, is more relevant to my violin playing.
Yeah.
Because I had this same wall that I hit with the self-made technique versus the standard technique in terms of playing the instrument. Yeah. I had developed my own language of getting around the fingerboard of how I use my bow to some extent. Partly because I was, because of the way I was practicing. My process was finding new sounds. That's what I was doing more often than I was playing scales growing up, as I was making my own music. Yeah. And so the technique evolved to facilitate that, and it evolved to highlight the sounds that I like, mitigate the sounds that I didn't like, and this palette of sounds, again, really just didn't have much to do at all with conventional style of good violin playing. Yeah. Like there were some things that great violinists did that I liked. There's other times I was like, this person sounds like garbage, even though they were like undeniably way better than I was. Yep. Still recording.
Yeah.
So after a certain point, because I was kind of just like making this up as I was going and didn't know, what's 10 steps down the road in terms of things that are going to be technically difficult, and what is going to help now, then, versus what's going to get in the way then that I'm doing now. And so that is when I think I began to appreciate trying to make that transition of being able to like not just play the stuff that I want to play because I've learned how to do it, but play all the stuff at a really high technical level. It was like starting over. It was like pressing the reset button.
When you wrote down music for the orchestra, did you also write the bit for the piano?
Yeah, I had a piano reduction. So when I wrote for, yes and no. When I wrote my violin concerto, I had started it when I was like 13. So it started out as a violin with piano accompaniment. So I had both the piano part and the full orchestration. About halfway through, it flipped to where I was writing for orchestra first, and then retroactively figuring out how I was going to fit on the piano.
I see.
Because I needed a pianist to be able to play it, because that's how you audition, and I was going to play it. But with the orchestral pieces that I started writing independently of that, I never had a piano reduction.
I see. When you were writing the piano, just like you said before, that composers who are usually pianists have sometimes a hard time, and they assign unfair parts or ill-sounding parts to the other instruments. Would you say that you had the opposite?
I had the exact same problem. Yeah. Where my writing was not idiomatic, as I would repeatedly find out after I showed my music to pianists. Yeah. And so I after
it just didn't flow very well.
Yeah. Well, because I wasn't. It was coming out of my head, not my hands, right?
Yeah.
Or at least coming out of my head with no consideration for what the hands of the pianist would be doing. You
didn't try it out or anything.
Not at first, because my piano chops just didn't exist. They really So that's actually something I started to work on. Is I started to challenge myself to see if everything that I wrote for the piano. This is like a few pieces later. If everything I wrote I could play, or could at least understand how you would play it in a way that seemed intuitive to me, who doesn't play the thing, and that helped. Actually, that helped a lot.
Yeah. So for each of the instruments that you wrote down music for, did you play it?
Not every instrument. I played tuba in band for a year because I did want to learn how to play a wind instrument and a brass instrument, and that helped a lot.
You wanted to play what?
Wind and brass instrument.
What is
So there's the brass family is the trumpets, trombones, kind of horns. They would I don't know. They're confused.
You said wind and brass,
right? And
what's the last word you said? Wind and brass and.
I don't remember if I said anything else. I mean, there's also percussion, but I never got it.
Oh, did you say wind and brass and shit?
No, maybe I did.
I thought at first it was like this whole long German word, the wind and brass and shit. Is this some thing that I'm missing here? Or you probably said wind and brass and shit.
No, I probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the last word? Shit. Shit, Neil, it's shit.
So I played tuba in band for 1 year.
Yeah.
I played cello in orchestra for 1 year. And I would dabble on the piano, but I figured there were plenty of those, so don't need to do one more.
Okay. So you wanted to jump into that TED Talk, but I brought you far enough away from it again that I
we can go
need to give a little bit of an introduction to what are you talking about. By the way, because of your injured finger, you cannot play the violin now, but like I said, I would like to insert some of your recorded violin in there at some point, and also follow it with some of your the pop music stuff that you're writing and recording these days.
Yeah,
but that's for post-production. Just like sitting here on a mat with a borrowed free micro post-production. Anyway, so you sent me this just to give some introduction to the people who may be listening sometime in the future. You sent me this TED Talk by, I gather she's a professor of
social sciences at University of Houston.
Called Brene Brown, and I listened to this TED Talk, and she was mostly talking about she first started talking about how she had done many interviews with people who could be broadly categorized into two parts. People who struggle with shame and a certain lack of self-worth, depressive people, and then other people who had a lot of self-worth, a lot of connection with other people. And then so she wanted to find out the root causes for such tendencies, and there were several ones that she named towards the end of her talk. And one important one that stood out to me, and both also in general in her talk, was vulnerability, was the willingness to be vulnerable. The synonymous with trying to shield oneself maximally from this arises a lot of disconnection from other people. And she was saying, like, for example, the less you talk about shame, the more of it you have. And towards the end, she was saying that although this vulnerability puts you in certain situations where you're experiencing things that perhaps you would rather not, synonymous with vulnerability arises joy and compassion and creativity. And in fact, there are certain things that we've been talking about that, like in particular, you were talking about, like I started playing pop music, I didn't know anything about it, but this vulnerability is a necessary part of the creativity. It's like two sides of the same coin. So yeah, you wanted us to jump right into it. I just wanted to lay out a little bit of background for
that's like a great introduction. It's really interesting. I encountered her work at the end of my second year of college when I was at University of Houston. I mean, coincidentally, I don't think it wasn't like I didn't see her like walking down the street. I was like, "Who are you?" You must have a lot to show me. Like,
just looking at you.
But I actually think like I became a victim of the shame mindset, and that was actually what became so difficult about playing the violin, because it became all about perfection. It became all about minimizing or mitigating.
This is what phase of your life was
20 years old.
Yeah, and you were at the conservatory or
at the university.
At the university.
Yeah, because I was at conservatory for 1 year.
Okay.
For 1 year. And I think most of this was a lot of this was a holdover from my time at conservatory.
Yeah.
Just because the environment of highly competitive classical music doesn't center around creativity.
Yeah, it's just this prevailing culture of perfection.
Right. Well, and if you think about their objective, it is to recreate other people's music.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So even just in there, the scope is more limited than if you were to create your own music.
Yeah.
That is not to say it is non-creative. It's just significantly less creative than those people who decide to pin their own stuff. And I mean, I think what's really interesting is once you. No, it's a tangent. I was just gonna say that nothing's ever actually original because we're always constantly I always I used to get so annoyed when I was really young because I would show some people my stuff and be like, "Wow, you sound just like this composer who I'd never heard of." I'm like, "That's not fair." I'm not ripping him off. I didn't know about it. So what I eventually I've decided that it's inevitable. No matter what I write, someone's going to tell me it sounds like blah 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 blah. And so either I can already know that I'm doing it, and just
By the way, there's a nice song called "In 1 Year" by Cage the Elephant. That's a band that I'm a big fan of, and it's a song which is a retaliation against all the criticism, all these people, and there's a line in there like, "You sound like so and so." Fuck it. Yeah. So it goes in 1 year and out the other. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. Okay.
Tangent. So Brene Brown. I would actually say that her framework for thinking about ideas like vulnerability and shame was actually what helped me move away from violin performance, and helped me
So that's when you watched this video? When you were
I watched the video. I read her book Daring Greatly.
Yeah.
Since then I've read her newer book Rising Strong. She's got coming out. It's coming out soon. It's coming out very soon. She's got a new book coming out.
Yeah.
And then I've listened to a few of her audiobooks as well.
I see.
So I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan. I think her paradigm for approaching the world is really laudable. I find it really difficult most of the time because it does entail this degree of vulnerability because it's sort of as she says, so many good things are predicated on being able to actually enter a space where you are vulnerable, where things are uncertain, where there's risk involved, and I think hearing that that was a thing that can be navigated even as hard as it is to go through was really empowering to me at that time because I was really struggling trying to understand what it was that I was doing with my life. I recently went and visited Houston for the first time since then. That was 3 years ago. And I was walking through the campus and I just got these flashbacks of that mind space that I was in, and it was really desperate. I was really feeling so trapped by the path that I had been set on, and because if you make it that far, you're a lifer. There are very, very few people that I've known about who made it as far in the circuit of becoming a classical musician who drop out the way I did. That's very, very rare. Most people are dedicated from an early age and reflexively say they could imagine themselves doing nothing else. So for me to make that decision kind of felt like just derailing the train. But having found this new language and lexicon and sort of interpretation of what it means to move into uncertainty and maybe still ways to navigate it with some sort of grace was really, really helpful. What I don't think I quite appreciated about that ideology is that it doesn't protect you from the risk, the uncertainty. Bad things will still happen. And I definitely feel like I hit some unanticipated road bumps after that kind of caught me off guard and has made me appreciate a lot more those people who are able to embody that sort of courage to continually be curious instead of being afraid, and to be motivated by some sense of letting the world in as opposed to keeping the world out.
I think this kind of, it's sort of interesting because I guess from the end of high school, I feel like along that dimension, I mean, I'm hoping, as I retrospectively look back, along that dimension of becoming more open and more vulnerable in terms of things that I do or I want to do, and to let the love of those things guide me as opposed to the fear of failure. I feel like that's a direction in which I have self-willed myself to just keep moving along that dimension, irrespective of everything else. And I mean, there's still ways to go. I mean, still every day I have all this self-doubt and fear about what am I doing. I'm like in my 5th year of my PhD. I'm spending all of this time outside of my lab and all of this other stuff, sitting down with Behnam now doing this podcast, and like time is limited, and I'm supposed to be working on blah blah, and I don't know, I have no fucking idea what I'm going to do after my PhD. But I'm slowly turning to turn that fear dial down and tell myself it's the fear that makes life uncomfortable, not so much the uncertainty. It's the fear of the uncertainty. I mean, we live in a civilized world where I have a bunch of skill sets. I'm not going to go hungry. Like, what is this therefore a fear of? This is a mental fear of a mental state of uncertainty. And it's a proxy for a fear of real lack, but that's never going to happen. So now I'm afraid of the proxy. That's not a right marker for real lack. That's, I think I'm past that stage. I'm not going to starve. I'm just going to tell myself that, living on a grad school, let's say I do something and have to live on a grad school wage for the rest of my life. That's not really going to cause a problem. But I'm going to tell myself this is a symptom that you fucked up. And so that mentality is going to cause the problem, not the fact. Like, even now, at the age of 28, I'm earning something that my parents at my age did not. Not because I went down this this solid track that, okay, I'm going to keep building my career. It's just that things are the way they are or whatever. But also because I pursued what I like, and so it can sustain me now, whatever. So I've been trying to do that, and I think part of what has resulted in this podcast and the fact that we are hanging out and whatever is that I saw reflections of that in the things that you like. I'm like, okay, this guy's into like multiple things as well. And it's fine. It's cool. Like, he like dropped out of college for a while and he's doing all these things that are not all adding up to this conventional, traditional track, like this career path or whatever. So it's okay. It's cool. Like, like you can still turn out happy and confident and whatever. So I'm not like going down this fucking rabbit hole where,
or we're both going down the rabbit hole together.
Okay,
we don't know it.
We don't know. But I think there was something subliminal about that. Perhaps something that I maybe already picked up in our first couple conversations at the retreat. But at least it became clearer later on. So I think, anyway, I mean, since we're on the topic of vulnerability and creativity, I think that's important. And every day now I still kind of think about this, like, what does it concretely mean to encourage in my own life the role of love and adventure and passion as opposed to the role of fear? What does it mean? What does it mean in terms of concrete decisions that I'm going to make? Like, for example, I don't know what I'm going to do after my PhD. Should I worry about that and start looking for jobs? Or, I want to do a backpacking trip across South America with some savings after I'm done. So should I start looking at the paperwork for that? So it comes down to day-to-day decisions. And so I have to like psychoanalyze myself sometimes. And like, is this motivated by fear? Is this motivated by something else? Is it actually true that if you never listen to the voice of fear, maybe you actually end up in bad places? So to some extent, well, how do I calibrate this? It's just an interesting question.
Well, that was super tough. I mean, what you're saying about like whether or not I should be worrying about this or worrying about that, and I know these are things that I want to do. I think I had this moment in a shower in the Czech Republic when I was 15 years old that kind of like just spiraled out of control. I was just like scrubbing my hair. I was just like, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And I was like, there was like a bunch of tumultuous like stuff going on in my family. So like, I really felt like, all the different rugs were being pulled out from under me. I'm like, what can I do? I'm like, I just got to do something. And so I just like, I decided, I'm like, I don't know what I want to do for the rest of my life. But I do know violin is something I'm good at. And I know right now I'm half-assing it. And I could take it way more seriously. And I could actually like, right now do something about that. Right now I could get a little bit better. Right now I could like actually practice. And so that was, I think, the first seeds of a sense of pragmatism that totally took me in the wrong direction. It hijacked my life because I didn't really question or understand why it was I was feeling this sense or need to regain some sort of control in the trajectory of my life. And I think it was a deeper just sort of inability to navigate uncertainty, right? And so later on, and I think in my adult life, that's been probably the theme is what do I do when I don't know what's going on, whether that's within myself or in the world around me, and do I try and fall back on worlds that I can control, or do I try and persist with that some way, or do I try and find some happy medium, and like what happens when I overexpose, underexpose? And so like getting to that point where I was consciously deciding, maybe there isn't just a conventional path that's going to do it for me, and I just have to like suck it up and make it work. But actually, like, there is something to be grown and nurtured and reaped from the weird eclectic mix of things I like to do. And if there is a time, place, life to give myself the license to explore that, this is the time, place, and this is the life that I've got to do that in. So it kind of, and that was a big a part of reading Brené Brown's work was just having the capacity, the voice in my head that was strong enough to say that like this might not work out in the conventionally successful way. Like, I might do all the things I love and live off of a grad school wage for the rest of my life, and that's actually more important to me than looking like I did it all good to the people around me, which wasn't the case for most of my life growing up. I was, like anyone else, very insecure about that, and perhaps even more insecure because I sometimes had the ability and opportunity to be successful. It becomes a shield. I was really competitive about everything in high school that I knew I could be competitive in, and have deliberately avoided those things that I knew I wasn't good at, to give the illusion that I was good at everything, which was absolutely not true. And that, pigeonholed me, that kind of stifled me, that kept me from exploring things that I maybe would have wanted to. It was less so sometimes. After that year off and I decided to put violin on the back burner, I did throw myself into a bunch of things that I was uncomfortable with. I joined the soccer team. I was in the High School Musical. I couldn't act to save my life, but I could kind of sing in tune. So that's where they took me. And so I found that that's actually like an inexorable part, I think, in my own process of understanding myself, is putting myself in new contexts or taking on new things, new roles. To me is an affirmation of a fluidity and identity that I think is true and real, and often obscured by the deep routineness of our lives and of our discourses about each other. In other words, like the languages that we use to talk about people.
I mean, we are social creatures. We can't help live in this ecosystem of this narrative, which is mainly mediated through the eyes of other people about us.
Right.
So
well, and it like it's so much more cognitively easy, emotionally easy, just generally easier to understand if you have a preconception of what the person is doing, right? Like if someone tells me like they're in business school, I stop thinking. Not because I hate business, but because now I think I understand what they're doing with their life. Which is of course like I think usually pretty wrong. I think an actual assessment of who someone is goes way far beyond knowing what their field of study is. And so that always was something that bothered me. And so kind of because I didn't feel like that was true for myself, I didn't feel like that was true for the people that I knew really well. So I didn't really think it was true for anyone.
Sometimes it's right. Sometimes the assessment that you make is right, but the convenience of making the right prediction some of the times that you get from labeling like that is far outweighed by all of the lost opportunities and discoveries and conversations because you labeled and then you didn't bother asking the question that you would have. Because I feel like less than half the time I'm right when I'm like I just don't bother continuing a conversation when I hear business school or something like that. This has happened to me. Like when I hear business school, this has happened to me, and I feel like that's I mean I could go into that, but in general there's something else that I wanted to point out. I feel like one reason I like hanging out with you is that your dial for this lack of fear, or let's say the dial for fluidity, is actually set higher than mine, in the sense that I have greater insecurities about, okay, so let's see, if I got into, and we'll come to your education that you're pursuing now, if I got into the program that you got into, I would be like, oh, this is great, and I would not miss a single semester. But then you're skipping this semester in Seoul, Korea, and you're just here doing this stuff. And in my head, it's like, oh, that's like complete creative freedom. Just like taking the whole reins in your, this is what I feel like doing now. I'm gonna fucking do it. Okay? And I feel like I would be driven a lot more by the fear of missing out on that semester. And so in that sense, I feel like I'm still more comfortable letting a certain procedure of instructions take hold of what's supposed to happen with my life and feel more secure in that than actually saying, you know what, fuck it, I'm okay just deciding now for myself that I'm gonna do this.
That's really well, and I guess I have like pretty like, it's almost like regular periodic interventions like this. And I think it stems honestly from, I did not have to undergo the same degree of like self-regulation that most children do. My mother was very free with how I structured my time, as long as I got the stuff done that I was supposed to get done. And oftentimes on my terms. There's a really great, this is like one of my favorite things. There's a lot of,
it's funny, I was about to bring in parenting.
Okay.
Yeah, because as far as my parents are concerned, I think they're okay, but they're still pretty, they're like, oh, what are you doing with your, and what is this, and what is the other thing? Like anytime that I pursued other hobbies, they would be very concerned about that time not being spent towards like academia or something like that. So,
I would say, well, yeah. So as a child, I was obstinate. Just like you, I would not relent. I would just, it would be my way or the highway, no matter what it was. It was really bad. I feel bad for all the people who had to grow up with me. But like, anyway, there was a lot of dyslexia in my family. This is the preface to the story. My grandmother had it. My uncle has it. My cousin probably has it. And so I kind of thought I did. I wrote most of my letters like in like either inverted or upside down when I started to write.
What do you mean? Like the letters were inverted or upside down?
Yeah, like the E would be going backwards, because to me that was the same thing. You were just looking at it from the left. So like that's sort of like.
So the whole thing would be inverted, or just individual
letters?
Individual letters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I also, when I first started to speak, would have whole sentences where the structure was obscured. It contained all the words. It just not in the right order.
Yeah, but were you being deliberate?
No. To me, it was the same. They were.
You?
It was the combination of words that was what was saying the thing, and the specific order was inconsequential because you can move them around.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, but there was this book on logic that my mom, this workbook that she had me going through, where it would give you blah 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 blah, and then you have to fill in the blank where it was supposed to fall, and I just thought that was the dumbest thing. So I just drew lines to everything. And there's just this like massive, because it was like 15 different definitions. Yeah. It was impossible to decipher. But I was like, yeah, you just follow this line. It goes there. It goes there. And I don't have to write anything. Whoop, 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 whoop. And that's how I would do those workbooks. Because it was like, this makes more sense. Even though it didn't really. But it made more sense from the perspective of someone doing it. But it made it more difficult for the person who had to grade it. Which to me was not my problem.
True.
But... so growing up, I was like pretty strong-willed, and I didn't have a sense of constraint. So I think I was lucky in being able to experience what a deep sense of contentment in my own rhythms and a familiarity with them. To me, I would go through really creative spurts followed by spurts of inactivity, and this cycle, it was just fine. It was just like a high tide, low tide. Sometimes I'm going to write a lot of music, sometimes I'm not. And that was fine. Yeah. To me, that wasn't indicative of my capacity. I knew if I needed to write, I could, but why would I do it when I wasn't in the mood? Yeah. And so, or why would I stop myself if I remember, man, one day there was, I think I was 16. This is such a bummer. I woke up one morning and I had this idea for an entire violin concerto. And it was like, I was like, okay, I'm not eating today. It was like a weekend. It was a weekend. It might have even been summer. And I just spent 12 hours straight writing this thing because it just latched into my head and I lost it. It was like a legitimate orchestrated. Yeah. I came back to it the next 2 days, but it was basically done. It was one of the things that got lost when I lost all my stuff. But so I would have things like that as a child I had the luxury of finding out what happens when you just you take off the training wheels and go downhill. Yeah. And experience forgetting everything else that's going on. And just following that creative process until it exhausts you. And so that to me was a good time. It was
it's like a state of flow.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes back to the creativity thing. I think you can only learn by creating. The trick is, I think there's this sweet spot in creating that is it's familiar enough that you can become in a flow state, but it's challenging and new enough that you're not learning how to do the same thing over and over again and getting stuck in a certain type of
I think
flow.
Those are actually the two conditions for
there's the challenge
state. It has to be slightly challenging enough.
I would say so I think flow state, what I'm thinking of is the idea of deliberate practice, which is where you put concerted effort towards honing a skill. And that I think deliberate practice is flow with a little bit of extra sweat because it's not comfortable enough that you can actually keep doing it. Flow to me is almost self-regenerative, whereas deliberate practice is exhausting to me. And that's something that I didn't really learn how to do until I was at conservatory was really deep, deliberate, focused work.
It's boring. That's why it's
boring as fuck.
Flow state is anything but boring.
But no, deliberate practice is boring and fatiguing. And so I think because it's you're taking the flow and you're slowing it down. You're grinding it to a halt. Yeah. And so I have this idea that I think there's probably somewhere in the middle where you can be deliberately practicing your flow state, basically. So that you're kind of you're a little bit edgy about the flow, you've got it directed in a way that you're, instead of doing the thing that you did last time, you're trying something else. And that's why this year, this summer has been so much fun making music for me, because I'll finish a song and I'm like, great, fuck, I'm never doing that again. Because it's 80%'s all right. There's this 20% that just didn't sound good, and I'm like, I don't have to worry about this. It's done. It's out of me, and I will leave you and worry, kind of like we were talking about with what am I going to worry about today? I'm like, I already wrote it. All right.
So last night after I biked home, when I was biking home from downtown, I had to go through campus, And I mean, there were all these projects but one of my projects was I'm going to learn how to go down a flight of stairs on a bike. Okay. so when I was about to cut through campus, there was this area where there was like one area had just 2 steps, and then next to it was 3 steps. I'm like, okay, this is perfect, because it was like an elevation, so there was an inclination, so in some parts the height difference was more, so if you just kept walking along it, the number of steps would reduce. I'm like, okay, I can just start from this end where it's just got 2 steps, and then I can keep going up. And so I just did that. I would like bike down the steps and go up to the area where you could just like bike up to the upper area and then bike down the steps again. And in the beginning, I realized there was a lot of fear when, as I approached the edge and I saw the steps, I'm like, I've never done this before. This could end badly. But then I would stop and I would go back and I would reach the edge again. I would stop again. I'm like, fuck, I can't do this. And I did it a couple times, and then like I looked, instead of looking at the steps, I looked at like the curb at the like after the steps. I'm like, if I just look at that looks entirely doable. I'm just concerning myself too much with the steps here. Like, I know that I'm not gonna fall and break my neck. So I went down it, and the first couple of times it was this, I was doing something where I wasn't in complete control, but I had the necessary skills. So the moment the first wheel goes off the top of the steps, you're not thinking, there is no deliberate action. It's just your body does this thing that the muscles have been trained to do. And I was fine. But as I went down that, and then I started practicing, after the second or third time, it became this monotonous thing. I'm like, but I have to practice before I go one more step higher. And then it became this deliberate thing where I knew I would be fine, but there were still techniques, little bits like, okay, how much can I slow this down to? How much more control can I get? And then when I was done and I went up to a different flight of steps where it was steeper and more, I'm like, okay, here it comes again. Like, as I went up the top, I was like, okay, whoa. Okay. And so, but those are the times that are also most arresting. They're captivating. They're immersive. You're not thinking anymore. There's no scope of thinking. And some other people have talked about it, that in these times, which are also times when you're very creative, the same thing can happen, is that the sense of the I, the sense of the self actually recedes. There is, I think in my interpretation, there isn't enough beyond supplying all of the necessary computations that need to happen for doing the thing that you're doing that's challenging. There is no extra CPU power left to sustain the voice in your head. That's this discursive voice that's always maintaining this inner monologue of the I. And once that recedes, all that remains is this pure experience. And this is what everyone's seeking at the end of the day. This is why people go like free climbing, risking their lives, because there's no space for the voice in your head anymore. But anyway, I mean, that's another long story. But yeah. So this book that I keep referring to is Waking Up by Sam Harris. He talked in one chapter was about the illusion of the self, and he talked about this flow state. And he said, when I say that the self is illusion, it's not something spooky or whatever. Everyone has felt the lack of the self. You just need to put yourself in a certain condition. But when you recollect, when you're done with that experience, like when you get off that roller coaster at the amusement park, the self, the voice pipes up again and says, that was my experience. I just had that experience. Buddy, you weren't there. No one was there. You can remember that now, but you weren't having that experience. There was no self that was having that experience. And well, that's just interesting, because I think some spiritual teachers, especially the ones who speak in English in the West, have talked about this being a wellspring of creativity, this state of flow and vulnerability as well. It all kind of comes together in some way, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Well, that's like, I think, the idea of, I think relinquishing your the chokehold self has I think is maintained by a lack of vulnerability. It's maintained by this. I mean, because shame is completely ego driven, right?
Oh yeah,
totally. It's predicated on you being there to exist, to experience all this, like, you know, unworthiness.
Yeah.
So I think vulnerability is almost like, well, I think vulnerability gets you in the door. I don't know that it, because you're definitely not going to be able to be egoless in flow state if you've got shame tapes going on, right? Like if
too much self-awareness,
right,
or self-consciousness.
yeah, that kind of self-consciousness is absolutely prohibitive to this idea of egoless flow. And I think vulnerability is the antidote to say there is this uncertainty, not just about surrounding like what people will think of me, but even about me and like, which I find really interesting when it comes to art. Maybe not so much like because it's like art to me is just this weird sort of it's hard for me to understand how it can't be motivated in some sense by the same primal drivers that make us think of ourselves as entities, as eyes, as selves. Because
you mean art? You're saying that art would have to be primordially driven by a sense of identity? I
feel like it is. I'm not sure. Well, no, actually, I don't think that's true. I think a lot of art is. I think it's very easy for it to get co-opted because it so often enters that vulnerable space that is so subject to criticism that funnels back towards your ego.
Yeah.
Right, because this art is about you. This art is a manifestation of you, and yet I think also most people are drawn to art for those times when they were in a flow state.
Yeah,
and when they weren't there, and that's what made the art feel so good. Is that it wasn't about them.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I have a thing or two that I want to say about that.
Yeah,
but before that, I think I want to point out something interesting. The more I think about this ego and its various mechanisms, I've been trying to do it for the past several years. Let's say the past 2 years. The more I notice that it's such an interesting thing that all its properties are self-fulfilling prophecies. And if you stop buying it, the reasons for buying those will also go away. Like, let's say shame, for an example. If you can induce a certain state in which your ethics are still solid, but you're shameless, like you're not shamed, you're not feeling embarrassed, you would know immediately in that state that there is no need to be either. It is either the actions or thoughts or your body language that when you are ashamed or embarrassed, you communicate to other people in an ecosystem of social individuals that other people pick up on it and respond in a certain way, that the shame is immediately reinforced. Like you immediately feel like, okay, I shouldn't have done or whatever. But when this sense of embarrassment is lacking, I played this little clip by Sam Harris where he says, I took MDMA when I was 17 and there was not a shred of shame or embarrassment or whatever. And the thing is, I've been in that state. And not only is the shame gone, it doesn't feel like you're left exposed. You don't really feel vulnerable. You don't really fear that because you know that it's okay. It was a shame that was the problem, not whatever I thought it was guarding me against. Because that's fine. I can just go ahead and do whatever and it's going to be fine. I mean, people can look at me and see that I'm just naive and whatever. But they are not going to do the thing that I thought, that they are not going to judge me, because it's just interesting. Like, for example, if you go into any place where there's a lot of people, let's say a concert or something, and no one's like, people are embarrassed to dance because they're so visible. If there are little kids in there, they'll just go ahead and do whatever. But people don't judge little kids for dancing in a visible. It's because little kids don't give a shit. So somehow people feeling shame is our prerequisite for our feeling judgment towards them. That because if it doesn't even matter, we let people be if they're not receptive. well, obviously I'm not talking about people who are going around stark naked. And that's why I said the ethics has still needs to be grounded. They need to be doing something that's not getting in our way. But if they're just enjoying themselves in a way that, in a non-self-conscious way, we also don't give them vibes that would make them self-conscious. It's just this weird system of ways in which
I don't know. I
would disagree.
I would just disagree with that. That I can speak for myself that there have been times where I have been so wrapped up in my own insecurities and discomforts that when I see other people exhibit it, I feel shame for them. Like I'm like, ugh, ugh. Or I even feel envy. So I'm like, I don't like that person because I wish I could be that way. Yeah. And I for some reason feel inhibited.
Yeah, true. But they don't give a shit.
Well, yeah, no, they'll be fine. I mean, I think if you surround people like someone who has that, I don't think is infinitely resilient. Yeah. I think like anything else, it's mixed in with all those other emotions, and I think we can all achieve that state, but also around enough negative energy, even the most non-shame prone person will find themselves beginning to mirror what's around them. Yeah. Which is at least that I think I'm pretty comfortable with that assertion, if only because I feel like I've experienced some really drastic shifts in my own relationship to shame in my adult life, that really the only bit like delineating factors were like who I was spending my time with and what types of narratives I was allowing to become prevalent, and then thus practicing and then allowing to manifest in my lens of how I viewed other people, which was just another way of practicing and keeping active this idea that like certain things are good, certain things are bad, this is shameful, this is not. I do think there is like a type of charisma around people who are able to who've acquired the skill of like letting that go, of taking that off their shoulders. I think in a population of people, it's not infinitely renewable. I think there's in my mind I'm thinking of some sort of like balancing, right? Like where like maybe 2 in 100 isn't enough, but like 13 in 100 might have a different effect, where there's like some sort of nonlinearity there.
Something else that you mentioned that I wanted to get into is a lot of art being created in this state of flow. And I remember I always liked drawing sketches, but they've mostly been, well, especially in the recent past, the ones that I've done are reproductions of other photographs or paintings. And I think part of the reason is I used to sketch when I was young. I used to do paintings and stuff, and then I was okay with that sense of vulnerability that comes with, I'm just going to make whatever. But then as I stopped doing that and went like further and further into maybe academia, where it's this world of controlled, and I kind of lost that willingness to be vulnerable and creative. And so my way back to starting to sketch again was to at least start with photographic reproductions of something where I know, okay, this is the roadmap. There's one way to do it right. Let's just practice. Let's start with the technique and whatever. We'll worry about the creativity later. And so I made several sketches. This was maybe a year back, and they were all like, I would look at them like, oh, that's really good, but the goodness was measured by how similar it was to whatever I was trying to copy. So one day I took LSD for the first time, and then I sketched again. And I remember, so my girlfriend was just lying on the bed, and I was trying to sketch her and the bed and the whole room. And somehow with every stroke, I felt like not only was all my inhibition and insecurity gone, there was no choice about it. I wasn't choosing that it be gone. Like every stroke was this flowing stroke that had note, like the dial was turned all the way to the other end of the spectrum. Like there was not a shred of insecurity. So there was none of this methodical clinical care. It was just like everything is fucking allowed, and like it was like this broad strokes and this whole flowing thing. And I wouldn't necessarily say that what turned out was necessarily better than what, but it was this. I mean, it was a whole other end of the spectrum. Like everything was like, I'm just gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do that, and let's see what turns out. And it's just interesting that a molecule can be responsible for flipping that switch in your head and changing something about a certain aspect of human personality that we hold so dear to humanity, creativity. It's one fucking molecule that can do that. Yeah.
So this is what I think I had in my mind when I was talking about creativity versus craft. Is because of moments like that. That your experience of what you're doing, is so qualitatively different from what you've experienced before. And that's creativity, right? Like that's this creation of something new, this experience of something you haven't experienced before. And to me, what craft is it's like having the technique, having the skills to take that experience and just full blown manifest it in whatever art form that is, or whatever method you're using. And to not so like to have at your disposal like the full panoply of tools that you would want. And that's, I mean, that was always like the frustrating thing about playing the violin is I never felt like I had the technical chops to play what was in my head. And the more I got into it, it felt like the more that gap widened, because I began to understand music so much better, and I was listening to it all the time, and I was being exposed to more and more performers, and understood much better how much nuance there was, and then thus how far away from being able to wield that kind of nuance I was. And I mean, it then kind of the flip side of that is like that probably means that most of that nuance doesn't exist for most people, especially like the vast like majority of the population who aren't even violinists, which is why now and so then thus the pursuit of those nuances began to seem more and more futile and ridiculous to me, which is why now I really love playing what I write for non-musicians, because I feel confident-ish in my ability to navigate like the sonic world is like, you know, music snobs think of it, right? Like I have tools, I have some experience with that, and I know pretty well where and when my production, like I know isn't hitting a benchmark that at least I can hear, and you know 90% of the time it's not hitting the benchmark even I can hear, and so it's just me trying to figure out how to use those tools better. But the other stuff is what's way more interesting to me. It's like someone who isn't a professional musician but has clearly listened to music their whole lives, has a relationship to music, likes some music, doesn't like some music. What are their tools? What is it about that art that is speaking to them, and why haven't I been learning about that? Why haven't I been learning about the connections that people make to pieces of music, and what is it about that music that connects, if it's not the voice leading in the harmonies or the bowing and fingering that they used in the middle of the piece. And that's been like a very, again, like sort of like self-discovery, self-guided exploration. And I have some like burgeoning theories that I've been testing.
So for example, when I listen to your music and give you feedback, it's going to be in like those organic, vague terms. Like I wouldn't be able to give you technical details on like something's kind of like missing, like maybe a couple more instruments in there, like some backbone. Like you're like, what the fuck is that backbone? Like, what the fuck is he on about? But I understand, like understanding it in terms of that organic, subjective thing instead of a technical description is challenging but useful.
Well, and letting go of the idea that there is one way of organizing, understanding, and explaining music that is objectively superior. Because because I don't think that's true. Because I've met so many people who have a clear musical disposition but no formal training, and I just as much want to know how they listen to music as I do someone who's been reading sheet music their whole lives. Because ultimately, that to me is, I think, another thing that classical music's just way far off of is this idea of music being a way to connect, especially live music. As a performer, it has the capacity. It's an opportunity, if you wish to take it, to be vulnerable and expose yourself, especially if you're playing your own music. If you're fully committing yourself to the music of whoever it is that you are playing, that's an act of exposure. That's an act of commitment into that moment. And I think the first half of that thought. Basically, that's not what I was doing with music for a long time, and trying to bring music back into my life as something that actually helps me connect with people, as opposed to like put myself away from people. Because a lot of what music was as an identifier to me growing up was like, oh, but Behnam's the music guy. It's like, the weird, like, he does music all the time, and you're not going to be able to, like, it was disconnecting. It would make people feel less like me to them, and I thought that was totally erroneous, and I was like, this could be a huge opportunity if only I made the effort to move in your direction a little bit and understand where in this sonic world we meet.
Wasn't there ever a time, even when you were young, when you cherished the fact that, oh, I'm kind of musically gifted, or cherish the fact that you're up in your high castle and that you are different from other people? I mean, I like, as a kid, that's great news, right? Like that'll. But it's like that's your ego. That's like a really it's a really shallow plant. It's a really small thing. It depends on who you are, but
true. Well, and I guess what I realize is like I do want to be. This goes back exactly to what Brene Brown was talking about. Like, I want that sense of worth. I want to believe that I am worthy of love and belonging. And to me, music was this lever that I could pull, and I would get some facsimile of that. People be like, "Wow, you sounded great." I'm like, "So that means you love me, right?" Right. Yeah. So that's sort of what it was, and it actually, like, in some ways poisoned both, because then it became the condition that needed to be met before I felt like I was able to receive those things. And so then that actually became very toxic, because it's no longer fun. There is this shame around mistakes. There is this my experience of the music becomes intertwined with someone's reception of it, which is not something I can actually control.
Thanks for joining us today in the Room of Lives. In the next episode, Behnam explains why he has never felt comfortable with the labels and groups in which humans identify themselves and each other.
Even through a window you look beautiful, imbue me full of love. Slip through my fingers, so promises keep me breathing love. Keep breathing love, keep breathing love, keep breathing love, keep breathing love, keep breathing love. Check the boxes, shackled for your thoughts and shackled from my ankles. Thought they'd turn out nice, that we break free so easy. Keep me breathing love, keep breathing love, keep breathing love, keep breathing love. Through a fit for assault, and through it all my fixer hopper kept me up when I was down, reminded me not to drown. Keep me breathing love, keep breathing love, keep breathing love, keep breathing love, keep breathing. Slipping into futures, sipping lattes, slamming poetry. For me, I say, forum's not my holiday. Flipping through a brochure, planning trips, summer getaways. Pour myself into another day. How can I keep breathing without love to breathe in? I still hear you leaving, my love's still heaving. How can I keep breathing without love to breathe in? I still hear you leaving, my love's still heaving. Keep breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep breathing. lips keep reaching further in the past for wisdom. Keep me breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep breathing. Circle dries, fills up with oak seeds. The front porch we brick concedes defeats. The bench swings empty, pacing breezes, memories receding. Keep me breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep breathing, love. Finger banging pastures, morning fixtures, texting stories. Clocks ticking faster, taking stock my absent quarry. Was it almost last year? The past must have a twisted humor to wrap around my neck and present like a scarf for lovers' news. How can I keep breathing without love to breathe in? I still hear you leaving, my love's still heaving. How can I keep breathing without love to breathe in? I still hear you leaving, my love's still heaving. Keep breathing, love, 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 keep breathing, love. Even through a window you look beautiful, imbue me full of love. Slip through my fingers, silk promises. Keep me breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep breathing, love, keep